Chapter 7, If Thinking is the Root Cause of Our Suffering, How Do We Stop Thinking? A crowded mind leaves no space for a peaceful heart. Amen. Heaven and Hell, a Zen Parable. A tough brawny samurai once approached a Zen master who was deep in meditation. Impatient and discourteous, the samurai demanded in his husky voice, so accustomed to forceful yelling, "Tell me the nature of heaven and hell." The Zen master opened his eyes, looked the samurai in the face, and replied with a certain scorn, "Why should I answer to a shabby, disgusting, despondent slob like you, a worm like you? Do you think I should tell you anything? I can't stand you. Get out of my sight. I have no time for your silly questions." The samurai could not bear these insults. Consumed by rage, he drew his sword and raised it to sever the master's head at once. Looking straight into the samurai's eyes, the Zen master tenderly declared, "That's hell." The samurai froze. He immediately understood that anger had him in its grips. His mind had just created his own hell, one filled with resentment, hatred, self-defense, and fury. He realized that he was so deep in his own torment that he was ready to kill somebody. The samurai's eyes filled with tears. Setting his sword aside, he put his palms together and obsequiously bowed in gratitude for his insight. The Zen master gently acknowledged with a delicate smile, "And that's heaven." It's not possible to just entirely stop thinking, but what we can do is reduce the time we spend thinking so that it gets smaller and smaller each day that passes. Eventually, we can get to the point where we spend most of our day not caught up in our thinking and live in a blissful state most of the time. When we say that we want to stop thinking, many people assume that we are trying to stop all thoughts in general. This isn't what we're trying to do. Now that you know the difference between thoughts and thinking, we are working on allowing thoughts to come and flow through us while we minimize the thinking about those thoughts that emerge. The most interesting and also most paradoxical thing about stopping our thinking is that we don't have to do anything to minimize it other than to be aware of it. By us becoming aware that we are thinking and that it is the root cause of all of our suffering, it automatically makes us conscious to the fact, and we become detached to it, allowing it to settle and pass. This takes almost no effort and is done through pure presence in the moment. Here's an analogy from one of my mentors that illustrates this concept. Imagine I give you a bowl of cloudy, dirty, murky water. If I asked you how you would make the water clear, how would you do it? Take 15 seconds to see what answers you come up with before moving on. Most people say something along the lines of filtering the water or even boiling it. What most people don't realize is that if we let the bowl of dirty water sit for a period of time, we can see that the dirt begins to settle on its own in the water, and after a while, the water becomes clear on its own. This is how our minds work also. If we let our thinking sit without disturbing it by trying to filter or boil it, the thinking will settle down on its own and our minds will become free from thinking. The natural state of water is clear, and the natural state of our minds is also clear if we do not disturb it. If life begins to feel unclear, disorganized, or stressful, and you're not sure what to do next, you now know that it is only because your thinking is stirring up the dirt, making your mind cloudy and difficult to see ahead. You can use this as an indicator to help you realize that you're thinking way too much. Once we become aware of the fact that we are only feeling what we're thinking, and that thinking is the root cause of our unpleasant experience, we see it for what it truly is. Then we allow it to settle by giving it space, and slowly we will see how we begin to have a clear mind again. You can also compare thinking to quicksand. The more that we fight our thinking, the more it amplifies the negative emotions and the worse it gets. The same is true for quicksand. If we're in quicksand, the way out isn't to fight it. If we panic and frantically try to fight it, it only makes things worse by tightening the grip it has on us and pulling us under faster. The only way out is to stop struggling and allowing the natural buoyancy of your body to take over to bring you back up to the surface with ease. The only way to break free from our thinking is to let go and trust that our inner Wisdom will guide us back to clarity and peace like it always has. If you find yourself fluctuating between thinking and non-thinking, know that it is completely okay and quite normal. There is no way that we can remain in a state of non-thinking every second of every day. And if we try to make that a goal, we will cause ourselves to suffer by forcing ourselves back into thinking again. We are spiritual, infinite beings having a physical, finite experience. Because of this, we are literally a living gateway between the human and the divine. So we will naturally oscillate between the two states of feeling anxious, stressed, joyful, peaceful. We cannot control or prevent the oscillation between the thinking and the non-thinking, but we can minimize the time spent in thinking and thus creating more moments where we do feel joyful, peaceful, passionate, and full of love. Although not being able to control when we begin to think can seem like we are cursed with an inevitable fate, it is not something to worry about because we can always return to the state of non-thinking. It is just a part of our beautiful human experience. What can give us true peace is knowing that we can always have this state of pure peace, love, and fulfillment underneath any thinking that we may ever have at any given moment. That beautiful state we always want is something that we can never lose, but can forget. But just because we can forget it doesn't mean that it's not there. Just like when it becomes night and the sun sets, we know that the sun is always there, we just can't see it. If we thought when the sun sets that it may never come back, then understandably, we will have a lot of anxious and fearful thoughts. The same is true for our state of being. We are ever really one moment away from remembering that we always have that infinite well of clarity, love, joy, peace, and fulfillment. We will forget sometimes, but when we do remember and realize that we are caught up in our thinking, when we experience negative emotions, that alone will allow us to return back home to our natural, beautiful state. All we have to do is remember it. Know that this is just our thinking, and have peace knowing that the sun is not gone forever and that it will rise again soon enough. Having that understanding will allow us to also appreciate the nighttime for its existence and its role in the universe. From that, we can see how it is meant to be a part of our human experience and begin to cherish its beauty as much as the sun. A crowded mind leaves no space for a peaceful heart. Tell me you haven't lived that truth out in your day-to-day life. Tell me you haven't had so many thoughts about something that you were so attached to or someone that you were so attached to that you felt like you had lost the sensation of peace that you carried within yourself. You felt like you were no longer yourself, even though you know it's physically impossible for you to become someone else. There is so much in this parable that we could literally unpack this for the next 16 weeks. A tough, brawny samurai once approached a Zen master who was deep in meditation. Impatient and discourteous, the samurai demanded in a husky voice, "Tell me the nature of heaven and hell." He didn't ask. Just like with any other story, it's easy for us to get distracted with the bigger character more deeply described and miss the nature of the supporting cast because the truth of their nature is in what's not said. Notice that the parable does not say that the Zen master was meditating peacefully until the tough, brawny samurai came up and disturbed him discourteously and impatiently by demanding him to be told the nature of heaven and hell. Notice that all wasn't well until the samurai showed up and disrupted him. Even after the disruption, and even after the samurai gives the demand to the Zen master that he knows that he is under no obligation to carry out or to fulfill, he still allows for a effective method of communicating and expressing the truth of the kingdom of which the Zen master and the samurai both originate from in his response to the disrespect. See, it'd be real convenient if who you were was determined by who you are when everything is going your way. when everyone is participating in your game, in your stage play that you scripted, and they're following the page numbers that you wrote, and everything is going well. Who you are is determined in how you respond to the undesirable things that you have to come to grips with, that you created, and that are only in your expression, not because that's a terrible person who did terrible things to you, but because you carried terrible ideas that created terrible fears that you rehearsed until you began to watch and anticipate this terrible creation arriving in your physical expression. The Zen master does not hesitate because of the samurai's approach or the samurai's capability. The Zen master, through faith, enters a presentation that he knows will conflict with the samurai's past experiences with war and combat, and also knows that the samurai has a programmed and set response to being belittled. In the parable, once again, the Zen master silently is teaching us that you will not teach anyone anything of value of the spiritual nature if you're afraid. If you're not operating from a state of knowing that no one can hurt you, knowing that nothing will be ever put before you that will end you, you won't approach this work the same as one who knows that there is nothing to fear because of perfect love. And notice when the Zen master teaches the samurai what love in heaven is, it's not a picture of emotional bliss or overwhelming affection or an abundance of nonstop thoughts about the other person or a infatuation with the Zen master. It's the acknowledgement of something that previously was hidden from me by an illusionary version of me that I now see the awareness of. And since I see it, I am capable of doing what I said I've been trying to do prior to now. I am changing my actions in an instant, in a moment. When you really become aware of the things that you are doing that are plaguing your experience, it won't take any process to stop it. It won't take any book or any teacher or any motivational speech to get you to put down the things that are causing you to suffer and experience things that lead you to explain to others how hurt you are. So how do we stop thinking? For the first time in our lives, we acknowledge that there is no value in the action of thinking that we've carried out unconsciously every time anything has occurred in our life, from a grasshopper or a spider crossing our path to a robber breaking into our house or somebody up in a gun and trying to rob us. The same exact process happens no matter whether it's an anthill or a mountain. And anthills turn into mountains by the power of our attention and our repetitive thoughts. We often rehearse to ourselves what we don't want because we are unaware, even though we say we know, that the things that we run from, we run to. The things that we say we don't want is actually a petition from ourselves to our source, calling for the very thing we say that we don't want. If you don't want it, you need to understand that whatever you give attention to comes your way. Whether the attention is inwardly, you secretly or openly desire this thing, or you secretly or openly desire this thing not happen, even going in seemingly opposite directions, by the power of the action of thinking, you will land in the same place. Because there's no such thing as effective thinking. You were given the universal mind. There are divine deposits in the universal mind for you to retrieve freely without payment. This requires no thinking. This requires no planning on your part. This requires no sitting down, mapping, determining 5-year goals. I totally get it. I get that they told you that Habakkuk said, sit down, write it out, and make it plain. I understand that that business book told you that if you came in without a business plan that was comprehensible to other people who were in the same industry as you, that you weren't prepared. I get all of that, but you were never designed to live your life by what some book said or the opinion of another person wandering in the darkness that you come from. The sooner you accept the truth about who you've been operating as, the quicker you can stop it, because it's your awareness of the idiocracy of your presentation that causes you to discontinue operating in a way that you find isn't conducive in progressing you towards what it is that you want for yourself and where you see yourself being. Everything you do is to prove to yourself that you are exactly who you think you are in the mental picture that you carry of yourself. I get that you convince yourself that you go to work so your kids don't starve because you're a good parent. But we both understand the truth of this is you go to work because you have a picture of yourself being able to go out and enjoy yourself and do things like have a house and have a car. And you have a fear that if you don't hold a job, you won't have the resources and the finances to do those things. On that list includes you not having the money to feed your kids and you appearing to be a bad parent, or DCF coming to get your kids, or you going to prison because your kids starved because you didn't have the money. But you have to understand your fears and your worries and your concerns are always self-motivated and self-geared. Like, we only pretend to ourselves that our fears are about other people, because if they seem to be commendable, then can we be appropriately corrected for caring? But if my caring is really me abusing you because I'm afraid of what your actions will mean for me, and you correct me for that, then you might be right to correct me. So I need a justifiable reason to carry my dysfunction. Sometimes it's my trauma, and sometimes it's what you introduce into my story by your actions and your words, and it gives me exactly what I need to do what I intended to do in the first place. I was already feeling bad when I used that statement that you said to say, you set me off and you made me go into that frenzy. I was already... Like, that's what the misfit world is based on in real life. Like, us not pretending with ourselves. What would this world look like if we weren't constantly pretending to be who we're not, and then pretending that we're not pretending so that we can pretend that reality is what we pretend it is? Well, I can't.